This week on the Droids, we're talking about the Clone Wars final season trailer, Season 7. It all starts at the end of February. That's the entire episode. Let's go. Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Ryan and Sam, I am Mike, sadly without Chris, who we believe is lost with a Wayfinder trying to find his way back to the podcast. Maybe a holocron. He'll have a better chance if he uses a holocron rather than a Wayfinder. Someday we'll find him.
He's stuck somewhere in the middle of a montage looking for a Wayfinder.
Right after a wall of text described to us that Chris is stuck in the middle of a montage trying to find a Wayfinder. We read it and then we see it.
I'm gonna let the listeners in on this. We had an audio snafu. That was the second time we did that. How do we, as the group, feel it went?
I thought you were going to criticize our laughing at your joke.
Well, no, because Sam, I was going to say if that was a fake laugh, that was a great fake laugh.
I think some of our listeners may not know. I used to be an actor, so
I need to say I felt it. I do know though that the first time that joke killed. So what you were hearing wasn't inauthentic in as much as that is how it was the first time.
I think there was so little time that passed between when you told it the first time to this time that it was still pretty funny. So I was still laughing from the first time.
Great.
I'll tell you what happened with me.
Let's go back to all the jokes we've made and really break them down.
I remember, as soon as Mike did the intro, I remembered, oh wait, Ryan said he's going to make that same joke again, but I couldn't remember what it was. So it was pretty funny.
Wow, this is our 30s, huh?
But
in a little while, we won't even remember that we recorded anything.
But we can go back and listen to it, and it'll be brand new to us.
Yeah, this will be like the equivalent to someone like retelling my life to me. Is that I listen to what will eventually be 500 episodes of the Droids You're Looking For, Star Wars podcast.
Oh, that's
the Droids You're Looking For, a notebook podcast.
I'll be like, were we holding cats? Why were we tipping cats all the time?
Sam, you said there would be a wall of text that follows Chris around. I couldn't help that if I ever had to give Chris's eulogy, I would start with, "The dead speak."
And then just say, I'm just kidding. Really, he's gone.
I would just be booed out of there or thrown at things at. But hey, Chris would appreciate it, I think.
Chris has asked that whenever he goes that we all bring Rotten Tomatoes to his funeral.
I'm gonna get a headstone that's carved in the shape of a speeder bike, and then just say he never rode.
Well, on a more positive note, because I would say this pod has been a little focused on some of the.
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna say at his funeral that I saw him killing younglings.
Oh, no.
Oh man, Chris. When you come back, I hope you're ready to indulge in all this.
We should watch out. Chris is litigious.
Also, yeah, Chris, just until you're next on the pod, be careful out there. I'd really. I'm going to be filled with anxiety until the next time we record together. So there's something else out there.
Be safe, buddy.
Yeah, there's going to be this real tough time between Friday when we release this and next Wednesday.
Yeah.
We have been a bit dark, not only in this last 3 minutes, but in some of our episodes in reaction to The Rise of Skywalker, but we get to talk about something very exciting. The Clone Wars is back. Some of us are caught up, others are not, but we're all still very excited about this.
This may be the bump I need to really get it done. Watch it all the way through. Because I've watched it and I love it. It's just a time thing.
It's the bump that I've needed, and I've had very little time, and I'm just slowly ticking down because I have an app called TV Time, which tells you how many episodes you have left of something. So I think I started with 117, 121, and I'm at 101, and I'm getting there. I'm probably not going to make it by February 21st.
When we say bump, we're talking about drugs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Has party?
Well, and if you want to hear more of this kind of thing, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and download us anywhere you find great podcasts, but also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, Droids Pod, the Droids Podcast on Facebook, YouTube. Check out the playthroughs by Ryan of Fallen Order. Email us, droidspod@gmail.com.
We can stop pushing those. Those are done.
Oh, man.
Ryan,
I've got these
you haven't
promo
beat it yet.
reads.
No, I'm just saying I haven't
promo reads
posted
in
any
front of
new
me.
ones. I beat the game, and that's that.
No, I know.
their time.
Evergreen content, Ryan. Evergreen.
Okay.
I think that your insights do last a lifetime. I don't think that there's something that are just done. They're worth visiting, even if you haven't watched it yet.
Mike, and you have the voice of an angel.
See, we'll butter each other up.
Sam,
me.
sorry you're not involved. We don't have anything
me.
nice to say to you.
Sam, you love James Bond.
I do. Oh man, we're so
you know
close,
what?
you guys. April.
You know what? The voice of God comes through your pen when you're drawing.
Oh, that's very true.
Oh wow.
If you believe in that sort of thing.
Chris, keep on trucking.
And hey, Chris, you'll get there. Hey, Chris, this is a great start. You'll get there.
So I think let's just establish a baseline. I've mentioned I'm only into season 1. Sam, I know you've made your way through. I think you're in season 4 right now.
Yeah, I'm. Oh
If
man,
the text chain is to be believed, Sam has quit his job and is only watching the Clone Wars.
I'm 3 or 4 episodes into season 4 so far. And man, I remember getting really into it for a while. I was doing Clone Wars on Netflix, and they announced like the date it was going to leave Netflix, and I like tried to get through as many as I could, and I enjoyed it. But I have to say, for me, the series really, really picked up in season 3. I don't know. I haven't read anything about like general perceptions of like how the show was season by season, and I think I'm going to avoid that until I just kind of form my own opinions at this point because I haven't read it yet. But man, I like really like mid season 3 through to like the beginning of season 4. I am so down for what's happening everywhere, and it's awesome. I love this show.
I'm excited to get there. I feel like early where I'm at, and I know a lot of our listeners probably have already watched the whole thing, but where I'm at, I feel like I'm like, all right, I want to see things get moving a little bit more, mostly because I think every episode has a reference to, I've got a bad feeling about this. And I'm like, I don't know that we need it in every episode. But I think the reason I'm really excited to keep going and for this new season is how much I loved Rebels. Because there's a lot in Rebels that obviously reference the Clone Wars. There are characters who came back from the Clone Wars. And it seems like they are going to potentially touch on some of the things that were left standing from Rebels in the Clone Wars. Maybe more so, obviously, backstory, because the timeline doesn't work for them to like follow up on what happened to Ezra. But I just think that there's enough there that from what I loved with Rebels that it makes me very excited about what's next. And I'm sure for people who love Clone Wars are like pulling their hair out because they're like, if you like Rebels, you should have watched Clone Wars long ago. But this is where we're at. And Ryan, I know you've kind of dabbled here and there. What's your anticipation level going into this final season?
Pretty high. Like I said, it's like really excited me to. I'm probably like halfway through season 2 of the Clone Wars, and I'm really excited to just like go all the way through. It's it has that element of Star Wars that I love, which is that kind of extended universe feel. It's building on the mythology. It allows it to get weird. I love the themes that the show tackles, especially considering, like, obviously it works for adults, but knowing that it's kind of like made for kids, I think it's like an amazing kind of force for good. And the things that they do in that show. So I'm really excited. Like I said, I think that this will be the push because, I know that I think they're rolling it out weekly, so that gives a little more time, in terms of like, it's not like by the beginning of February I need to be completely caught up to be part of the conversation at all. But I think it's doable. So I'm really excited. I love the look at the trailer. I don't know all of the context for what they're showing in the trailer, but I know that it seems very exciting.
Can I ask some questions, clarifying questions? Was this meant for, say, like 10 and under, or like 13, that general Star Wars age? Was this directed at? Do we know?
I'd say if we were going in like a little league kind of divisions, it's probably the 9 to 12.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there is care and an eye put towards making sure it plays for those people. But I think Clone Wars, back in seasons 1 and 2, was geared towards kids, and I think that
especially the movie.
This is the 7th season of that series that has been on basically an extended hiatus after season 6. I think this is for us. I think this is for people who watched the series as a kid. I think this is a classic like Disney nostalgia play. It looks darker to me. I mean, like the trailer, obviously it's at a darker period, right? We're getting closer and closer to Anakin's turn in Revenge of the Sith, like that's the timeline we're like, we're fully in the wars now. But like, I'm talking pure, I'm talking like color palette and like tone of that trailer. It's dark. It's way darker than the series has generally been. Although I have gotten to more recent episodes in seasons 3 and 4 where it's like, I feel like I've just been more aware of and noticed the like straight up killing that's happened more. There's there's murder and deceit, and
that was kind of my point. Not even necessarily the more like plots and that lead to murder. There's a lot of just nonchalant deaths and killing early on that I thought, wow, for like a 10-year-old, this is a bit much, or a concept to be a bit frightened by when some of the clones are dispatched the way they are. And obviously, I think at that age, when you think of stormtroopers, you don't worry about them being killed. But when you've gotten to know the clones and gotten to know some of these different guys like Rex and, all of you're a little bit more taken aback when they're just like, well, they're dead and we moved on so quickly. We didn't even talk about the fact that they died. But I guess that's a kid's show.
Well, I think that it's interesting that as the series goes on, it kind of interrogates that idea.
Okay. That's good to know.
At least in episodes I've seen, like there's an episode, I've talked about it on the pod before, but there's an episode where one of the clones meets another clone that is essentially defected and like started a family, and I was like, wow. I remember seeing that, like I just randomly watched an episode when it used to air, like it was just on TV, and I was like, wow, like what an interesting concept, especially for a show for kids, for them to just complicate the issue even to any level,
Yeah.
I think like the thing that I'm finding, and again, we're all speaking without having finished, so I don't know where it goes in the last few of the original seasons to air, and I don't know where it's going to go in 7. But like one of the things I've enjoyed the most is that the show really uses, Anakin and Obi-Wan, who we think of as kind of the leads of the show, are they're ostensibly they're the draw, they're the action beats, but really the show is truly Ahsoka Tano's show and Padme Amidala's show. And I think it's in that way, I think it's a very progressive show, and it's kind of like stealthily so. I don't think it bills itself or announces itself as a feminist show with 2 female protagonists, but I think they are truly the leads of the show. I think they are who we're ultimately invested in, and it's the 2 characters that Filoni and company give the most room to grow and the most interesting storylines and the most character challenges. And I've been enjoying that especially. I've just loved watching both of them in the context of of characters we already are familiar with, or more familiar with, because you really don't get as much. You don't get as much Padme maybe as you remember in the prequel trilogy. She is largely a foil for Anakin's journey. So I'm loving it.
Another
just like McDonald's.
Well, another maybe dumb question here, but I think this is maybe going to be answered by the end of all of this. The clone troopers that we've known to fight with the Jedi and be for the Republic, do they just become the stormtroopers for the Empire? I know some of them, because of what we saw in Rebels, end up, like you talked about, Ryan, they defect, they don't join, they go off and they live on their own, and they fight with the rebellion from that point forward. But are we meant to believe that the lion's share of the clone troopers just become the stormtroopers?
I think at the beginning.
I think so. Yeah,
I think that's like
sure.
their base. They start with, and then they probably recruit people. Because the Empire if I have my mythology right, the Empire is the Republic. It's just that Palpatine infiltrates from the inside.
I mean, the Republic still exists at the beginning of Star Wars, which some people call A New Hope.
Well, the
last like that first
of
conversation is like the Republic is all but defunct essentially. But like, the Empire is the Republic just being infiltrated from the inside. So and pulling the wool over the eyes of civilians. So if that's to be believed, some people would just join the Republic army.
Yeah. But I guess
end up as stormtroopers.
I guess watching this and watching season 1 and watching the empathy of the clones and most of the clones being generally good guys, that for them to just transition to following the orders of the Emperor. But I guess that's kind of the conversation you always find about soldiers in war. They're doing things that may not necessarily align with who they are, but they're following their orders.
Do you think, and I don't know if they've spoken about this, I'm not sure if they've spoken directly, do we think that this will... I'm basing this basically off of Anakin's hair, because his hair in this is like very much Episode 3.
Yeah, right.
Which I respect that his hair in Episode 3 is not a very good hairstyle. It's essentially a mullet, and they committed here, which I think is noble. Do you think this will go straight up to Order 66? Maybe even beyond, but like I would imagine part of the tragedy is seeing these characters that we've built with, meaning the clone troopers, like. The tragedy is seeing them possibly betray our main character.
Well, because I think Rex shows up in Rebels. He's in an episode of Rebels, and I think he actually stays around for a while. And I don't know that I'm not caught up, but I don't know if we ever got the story of how he ends up away from the Empire. Mm-hmm. So that could be at the end of this, too.
I imagine they're going to try to... I mean, not that it'll be bad if they don't, but I imagine they're going to try to, tie a lot of that up.
Yeah.
I mean, Order 66 happens after Anakin's turn. So the interesting question to me and what you're asking, Ryan, is like, are we going to see, is Season 7 going to overlap with Revenge of the Sith? Which I think was like never my assumption about this show. My assumption was that all the seasons of this show would take place between episodes 2 and 3. And so... I could very much see it happening, and I think it would be kind of the most fitting and most tragic way to end this show that dove so much more deeply into the core concepts that like Lucas put forth, is like if we actually saw it, more deeply explored over more time, that would be amazing. But then I do think you run into what times. What time jumps do you make? What elements do you skip over? Because they're not going to show us the fight with Grievous again. They're not going to show us Anakin murdering Dooku again, I would guess. But like, are we going to see the point where Dooku's gone because he's been killed? I don't know.
I wonder if we're going to see moments where it's like we're leading up to the story of Revenge of the Sith, and then you start an episode with like these flashes of what happens with his transition to fully dark at Order 66, and then the story continues. So it's like, we know this is there, but here's a brief reminder, and then let's keep going with the story.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if like the Battle of Coruscant is involved in this and things like that.
Yeah.
Whether we'll see direct overlap, I'm not sure like very clearly what the time frame of Revenge of the Sith is. I certainly know that The Rise of Skywalker takes place in 16 hours, but I don't know that if Revenge of the Sith, I would imagine it's a few weeks, like beginning of that movie to the end.
I'm sure a lot of the questions that we are wrapped
although no, she reveals that she's pregnant and then she has the babies at the end, so it must be a few months.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, how incubation
in this trailer, Padme is already showing.
I don't know how I got to finish that sentence. I don't know how human incubation works in the Star Wars universe. I do know how it works in our world.
But like in the trailer that was just released this week, we do see that like Padme is showing. So at some point we get far enough into the story and we get far enough into the timeline that she is visibly pregnant, which I can't remember when Sith starts. Is she?
I mean, she's wearing very flowy clothes. She's like sitcom pregnant, where she's like carrying boxes.
Oh,
and
sure,
stuff,
sure,
but,
sure.
Well, I
I'm
think
not sure. I guess all these questions will be answered for us.
I think these questions will be answered. I'm sure those things that we have brought up that have already been addressed in the series. If you've watched all of Clone Wars and you want to be like, hey guys, let me inform you of what happened, droidspot@gmail.com. I believe if we don't want to hear spoilers, some of us will step out. But if you want to inform some of the questions we're asking, we would appreciate you jumping in and getting involved in the show. This trailer, we don't need to go shot by shot. I think one of the things I do want to mention is, Sam, you're very right. This is not only dark, but the animation has changed from the original series. Not surprising with the amount of time that's gone by. Every shot that I feel like not only of Anakin's face, and we get that Anakin is going to be a lot angrier, a lot more indulging in the dark, so his face is going to be angrier. But I feel like Ahsoka, these tight shots on Ahsoka and the tight shots on Obi-Wan, there's a lot more pain in their faces than anything that I've seen, and obviously I'm only in season 1, but anything I've seen before in the Clone Wars. And so that's kind of an interesting change there as well. But the way this starts is, I think, something that Chris, our dear departed Chris, would love, is that it's a nice pan down to a planet. That's the way the trailer starts, and it just feels like a very appropriate beginning. And this is a very cinematic trailer.
I think it's amazing that Clone Wars has managed to stick to the visual language of Star Wars, never feeling like it's betraying or stepping outside of that, while also introducing like just a myriad of new ideas all the time. And I and this is as a person who hasn't seen all of it, but also is, I'm familiar with what happens in it. And I think that that's incredible. That's like no easy feat.
It's not, and it is one of the most impressive things. And I just watched. Season 4 opens with. I'm so much less impressed by James Wan's Aquaman after watching the opening of season 4 of Clone Wars.
Because I haven't seen it, I'm now very excited to see what that leap is, or how you're getting there.
And it's just like it's largely because of the visual language and the way it's kind of like, I think in lesser hands, the amount of extrapolation that the show asks of its creators would result in something that kind of rings false, or starts to look like its own thing, or doesn't really jive anymore. But somehow they've managed to go to, they've gone to so many corners and so many worlds of the Star Wars galaxy that we've wanted to go to, and that we didn't even know we wanted to go to, and still maintained that look that was really pioneered by Doug Chiang for the prequels, and slowly, building in little elements that you see of, what will become the Empire. It's such good world building, and it's so. It's been really a good solve for me after Rise of Skywalker, which I just I said to you guys before we started recording, I've truly never. I can't think of a time I've been that disappointed in a movie theater. I feel like everything that I had invested in, that I cared about from the storytelling that had been set up in the first 2 films, was either given short shrift or just wholly abandoned, and felt so incongruous that to go back then to the Clone Wars over the last several weeks and really be, I'm watching several of them, every day or couple days. It's Star Wars at its best. It's world building at its best, and it's classic, hero storytelling. It's fables, right? There's a lesson in every. There's some kind of morality tale in every episode that is just I couldn't think of a better thing. when I have kids, I'll be excited to show them this show. I can't wait.
It's also, I know this is strange to say refreshing, because it's something that happened, 12 years ago, but in terms of them approaching the new season of Clone Wars, I imagine they're continuing with the whatever philosophy they had with the original series. And to not hear a creative talk about how they're going back to what we're going back to how people remember Star Wars, whatever. It's they came out. This came out right after the prequels kind of finished up a few years. And, people had their feelings about the prequels, but they essentially were like, this is what the story is. Like, it was, George was obviously still at the helm, but Dave Filoni and the creative team took it and they were like, this is what the story is. However you feel about the prequels, this is going to be great. And we are not betraying the prequels in any way. We're just using that world and moving forward. And it's like, people love this show. People all over love this show, meaning like all over the fandom. People who hated stuff about the new trilogy, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, this show is doing basically what we kind of wished The Rise of Skywalker would do, which is like, take it where it lays, regardless of how you interpret people to felt about it, and then just do the best story that there is for it.
Wasn't George deeply involved, though, for several seasons?
Yeah, I mean, he's an executive producer on the show. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that. But for all intents and purposes, Dave Filoni was kind of his protege. So
his avatar in making
his Padawan.
These.
Why wouldn't we use that word? So I believe if not directly like being in the writers' room or whatever, it's like he was still very at the helm of Lucasfilm, and Filoni was had a huge creative relationship with him. So
I recall that like he was still in that mode of stories approving, like this is the way I want it to go, versus even with I guess Rebels started after the Disney acquisition, right? So none of that.
I think it was in the middle of it.
No, yeah, I don't. I think it had already begun.
Because so with that, there wasn't the same kind of involvement that he had. But either way, Filoni being the Padawan in this situation, he has stuck to his relationship that he built with George, and as you said so eloquently, Ryan, I mean, it is a beautiful thing for him to build on it, even if the prequels and what that story wasn't working for some people. It's just run with it, and I think everybody now has been saying this idea of taking the way improv is set up and the yes and, rather than being like, no, stop. It's a better way to make stories to just build off of what you were given, rather than just saying, I will stop it here and do something different. And so I'm thrilled because I feel like this podcast alone has changed my perception and my appreciation of the prequels. This show, and I'm only a season in, is changing the way I give my tip of the biggest cat I've got.
You're all welcome.
But I say this show has given me even more appreciation of those films, and I think I'm going to go back, and especially, this will end, I would think, in a well done way by the team that's made this series and made Rebels, that it's just going to make me want to go back and watch Revenge of the Sith again. I'll probably watch Attack of the Clones again. I'm just excited to see so much more of this timeline that we deserved more stories for, because even in a 3-film trilogy, you couldn't get into enough of the war, and here we are getting great stories about that and more, which I'm just thrilled about.
Well, Filoni, by all accounts, I forget if it was, I heard in an interview, I forget who it was, if it was, may have been Jon Favreau or maybe Kevin Smith. They were just taking a quick like jab at the prequels, just something like kind of innocuous, but they said like, don't tell Dave Filoni I said that. Because Dave Filoni, by all accounts, is like a huge fan of the prequels. I mean, he was there when they were making them, but it's like he clearly sees like the value of them.
Yeah.
And also, I've been really realizing and listening to like more Star Wars podcasts and hearing like younger fans talk about it, people a little younger than us, that the prequels and Clone Wars, like it's all the same thing. It's not like a thing that like the prequels came out and they were devastated or whatever, however people felt, and then Clone Wars came out and it's like, oh, like this is kind of making it better. It's like it all is like the same to them. So it's all, that era of Star Wars is just great.
Yeah.
Because it's like also they were young when the prequels came out and loved them. I obviously loved the prequels as well. Famously on this show,
you were a bit
I've evangelized.
young too.
I was I'm not saying I was old, but like what I'm saying is like, Revenge of the Sith came out when I was in high school, and there were people who were trash talking, and I was still like, this is awesome. But for people who were a little younger than that, this all kind of happened at the same time to them. So it's just like the character of Padme isn't just Natalie Portman and however she is portrayed in those movies. It's also the Clone Wars and how she is portrayed in that. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
because it forms such a more complete world, and that rocks. Thanks, Dave Filoni.
Well, I think the thing that again, and this is so to speak to the other side of what you're talking about, Ryan, which is like my perspective, which was someone who was, I would not say that I was like a prequel hater or like, hugely disappointed with the prequels. I liked them. I think I was a little underwhelmed by them, and it was primarily because in high school the things I was like most focused on were like acting and like cool like great dialogue. It was like the time when I was a pretentious moviegoer and like theater kid at my high school who like had like very specific things that like very specific boxes that I wanted movies to tick for me, and I was discovering all like the great cinema of the 70s, and it's that like that was the formative age I was at.
Sam was
when I saw it,
voted most cool in high school.
I was voted Broadway bound in my high school yearbook,
Which is almost the same as most.
in some circles.
That famous superlative, most cool.
Hey, I was getting there.
But sorry, just what I was.
I gotta say, I'm not making fun, Sam. I think Broadway Bound is really cool.
I think it is too.
And look at you in a podcast in New York City.
I'm Broadway adjacent. But when I saw those movies and I was a little like underwhelmed, by them, the thing that watching the Clone Wars has done was it. Again, opposite to what you're describing of like kids who grew up with both and kind of see it all as one thing. I can't help but see them a little bit as separate from when they came out, and visually separated, obviously from the with animation being the media for one of them, but like diving into the actual Clone Wars, which was, again, this thing is all based on a kernel from Star Wars, which some people call A New Hope. When Obi-Wan like casually tosses off, a relic of the Clone Wars, or mentions the Clone Wars in the scene with his first scene with Luke.
It's first mentioned by Leia.
Oh,
you
you're
served
right.
my father in
the Clone Wars.
Yes, thank you for the correction. That's true.
Ryan, you were kicked off the pod for less. So Sam, a bit good day.
Oh man, we're dropping like flies. Chris is dead, and I'm off the pod.
Is there a difference?
But the idea, though, that this makes the Clone Wars the sort of massive affair that we were promised. The sort of like, it's the biggest conflict that we've seen in all the Star Wars. It's ongoing. It's been ongoing for 7 seasons. It's really, it's pretty cool, and it's definitely enriched and deepened the second two, which again, my favorite prequel is still Phantom Menace, which doesn't even get to the Clone Wars yet. So this has made episodes 2 and 3 definitely better for me personally.
All right, we've been talking for about 30 minutes here, and we need to actually reference some things in the trailer. I know that we're not all caught up, but visually, tell me some things that you loved from what you saw. I think a lot of close-ups in this, especially the first moment that we see Maul. And I'm very excited for more Maul. I never thought I would say that. When I heard that he was alive in the Clone Wars, I thought, come on, why take away the importance of that moment for Obi-Wan to defeat the villain the Sith who had killed his master? I felt like it undercut, not for the pun, undercut what Obi-Wan had achieved. And yet, here I am, now one of my favorite things is Sam Witwer as Darth Maul and wanting to see more of that story.
I mean, I'm excited for that too. I can't wait. The storylines as they start weaving in. Oh shoot, I'm not going to remember what the planet is with where Maul's I guess species comes from.
Dathomir.
Dathomir, yeah. Well, like I've hit some.
That's 2, Sam.
I've hit. I've hit a few episodes that involve Dathomir, and it's amazing. I mean, for me, the Maul stuff looks cool, but for me, the shot that did it was Obi-Wan in literally the fog of war, looking around, kind of hopeless
Dirt
or
on
helpless.
his face.
Like that to me was the shot that I was like, I I'm scared for him, and I can't wait to see the sort of dramatic, like he looks hopeless. He looks like, or he looks wounded, not physically wounded, but like things are going bad, and that's where we know this story's headed. So I'm excited to see it get there.
Well, that's what I was talking about when I said that the characters kind of looked a little bit more fierce, a little bit more serious than they had before. That shot, the look on his face, and I think, again, I'm so early in Clone Wars, but in the first season, there's never been a moment like that for Obi-Wan that I've seen in the first season. And I get it, that's only a few episodes, but it just was a very stark contrast for me to see that moment.
I'm very interested for obviously it's kind of like the big thing of the trailer, but Ahsoka and Maul, just seeing how we get to that point, like why these two people would be in the same place.
Heck yeah.
I'm very excited for that last shot of the door closing with Ahsoka and the two lights. It looks awesome.
Ahsoka's development has been so good, and I know that I think one of the things I mentioned earlier that like I see her and Padme as the two protagonists I'm most invested in the Clone Wars, and I am, unlike Mike, I have not watched any of Rebels. I have that all to look forward to, and I think it's going to. I think I'm going to love it just as much, and I'm looking forward to the fact that I know I have so much more Ahsoka Tano like storyline in my future, because I think right now she's the character I'm most excited by in Star Wars. And I know I'm behind. I know a lot of people have been there for a long time. I know I'm not saying anything new, but like this is where I'm at. This is my first go through of her storyline. Sam,
we may not be done with Ahsoka Tano. The Clone Wars may not be the end of her story.
This is what I'm sensing in the Force.
I hope, and I think that a lot of people have thought this as well, could there be in a live-action Ahsoka series or movie in the future? I don't know that they would go movie. I feel like more likely they would go series.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine anybody at Disney wants to make another Star Wars movie right now.
Well, I think there are some people who are pretty happy about the $1 billion box office, so someone wants to. Maybe the person who came in and chopped that whole movie up. I don't know.
Considering it's less than any of the main saga storylines have made in the new era, it did better than Solo, and that's it. So your last,
By the way, I found
Star Wars
another
movies you release.
I found another wonderful friend who loves Solo the way I do, and says that we should all revisit it, and I agree. I think we should just hey, we've been trying to do a pod where we watch a movie live. Let's do it for Solo. Yeah. How about it?
Tip of the cap to your new friend Alden.
Rogue One? We've never talked about Rogue One officially on the pod.
We have. Well, we've talked about it. We talked about actually very early on in the pod. Chris and I went through all the special features on the Blu-ray. So there's been an episode
about the special features, Mike. Fine. Look, hey,
I'd like to give a shout out, a huge invite to Mike's friend Alden to be on the show, who loves Solo as much as Mike does.
Do you think Alden loves Solo? Do you think Alden is very proud of Solo?
I mean,
I think he should be. I thought he was great.
I think he should be too. I'm sure he has complex feelings about it.
I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Their experience with it is much different than our experience.
Of course. But Ryan, you mentioned there are a lot of shots of Coruscant and what seems to be a battle on Coruscant, which I'm very excited to see, because I think that. And then, of course, I love that there is a moment in this where you see clone troopers with jetpacks. They fly now. They've flown all along. They've flown for decades.
Yep. Do your homework.
There is no homework for jetpacks.
The battle. I hope it goes to the battle of Coruscant, which it famously opens the Revenge of the Sith. That is the Battle of Coruscant. So, another happy landing, as they
say. Well, I am excited. I think we all are ready for this at the end of February, and I think we'll all power through, and I think we'll have more things that we'll be talking about with revisiting the Clone Wars for some of us watching it for the first time. Let us know what you think of the Clone Wars. Are you excited for the final season? What do you think of the trailer? Email us, droidspod@gmail.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, Twitter, DroidsPod, Instagram, DroidsPod, Facebook, The Droids Podcast, and check out that YouTube playthrough. Do not miss it. It is urgent for you to go and watch that Droids Pod on YouTube as well. I think that's going to wrap us up here on this edition of the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Join us again next week. Who knows what the galaxy has in order for us, because supposedly in January is when we're supposed to be hearing about the next Star Wars film, when it would be, what it would be about, who's directing. They did say January.
They're now changing it to when it would have been, what it would have been about, and who would have directed it.
Yes, because they already have moved on. They've already changed the director. Remember, we haven't even talked about this. I don't know why, but Taika Waititi rumored to be making a Star Wars movie. That's probably a conversation we should have had on this podcast.
Well, there it is. More next week. Tune in.
He did a great job in the Mandalorian finale.
If you want to hear our thoughts on that, click that subscribe button and then click it again, because you're probably already don't touch. If you're subscribed, don't unsubscribe. But if you're not subscribed, if you discovered us, subscribe, because then because one of the next things we're going to talk about is going to be Taika Waititi's Star Wars and how we feel about it. I nailed it.
If you want to hear more like that, remain subscribed or become subscribed.
You know what? We have to say that Chris would really appreciate if you made a donation in his name to a Younglings Foundation for an honor of his departing from our plane of existence. Yeah. So please donate in honor of Chris.
Chris would have appreciated it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That's going to do it. Chris is fine, everybody. He's fine. Don't worry about Chris.
As of this recording, yeah.
Oh my god, we need to. This is the exact thing that I said at the beginning. I was uncomfortable with. I'm going to call Chris today. Call your parents, everybody.
And with that, well, call your parents. Maybe not the ones that are evil Sith Lords, but otherwise, that'll do it.
Grandparents.
For the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. What they
Anna? Is that you?